Parrot feather stress bars. What are they and why do they happen? That's what we're talking about in today's video. I'm also going to show you feathers from two of my birds in my flock and why they developed stress bars, and I'm also going to show you what stress bars look like under a microscope that you can get at home that's quite affordable. Stress bars appear on any feather in a parrot's body, and they are a line across the width of the feather, so a horizontal line. It can be one line, it can be multiple lines. Sometimes they're white, sometimes they're black, sometimes it's just a brittle area as the feather is growing, and that's the important part as well. These feather stress bars always occur when a feather is growing. They can't just randomly appear on a feather after it's grown. They always happen when the feather is actually growing. If you do see a stress bar on one of your parrot's feathers, or many of them, there will be a reason for it. The most common of reasons are nutritional deficiencies, especially with things like incorrect protein or incorrect protein amounts, or missing amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, because feathers are made up almost completely of proteins. So if there is an issue with protein or amino acids in your bird's diet, that is going to influence how well a feather grows. Nutritional deficiencies in vitamin A, vitamin D3 and calcium can all influence the likelihood of feather stress bars occurring as well. Now, they're called stress bars because they put stress on the feather and the feather doesn't develop properly, and it can actually be caused by stress. If the feathers are growing in and your bird has a stressful experience, that can influence where the stress bars appear on those feathers. It is a good indicator if your bird is actively growing feathers whether there is something wrong. But as I mentioned, if the feathers have all grown in and the molting has stopped and your bird has a stressful experience or a nutritional deficiency, that might not show up in your bird's feathers. And it's the same with illness as well. If our birds are poorly and they're growing in their feathers, that will also influence how the feather looks and how well it grows. But again, that doesn't mean that if your bird's feathers are in beautiful condition that they're always going to be healthy. You need to make sure you're checking in with your avian vet if you're unsure if your bird is healthy or not, and also if you do see any stress bars appearing, it's also good to take them in for a checkup to make sure everything is okay. Now, another less serious and quite common one that can happen with stress bars occurring is trauma to the actual individual feather as it's growing in. So this could be maybe they've had a bump, maybe they've crashed into something, or something I'm going to tell you about in a minute with my own bird, spoiler alert. If there is any kind of disruption to that feather as it's growing in, that can influence how it looks, whether it is completely intact, whether there's any brittle areas, and sometimes it's one of those things that can happen because our parrots are quite boisterous, they're quite excitable, and if they're scrabbling around, sometimes accidents can happen. Now, in my personal non-veterinary opinion, if there is one, maybe two feathers like that, it's probably going to be from some kind of accidental trauma to the actual feather as it's growing in. If there's lots of feathers like this with the stress bars occurring, that is quite a cause for concern, but one or two is still worth getting checked out with your avian vet. However, sometimes there is an obvious reason for it. If you want to take a look at your parrot's feathers in more detail, you're curious about it or just curious about the natural world, or maybe you have had an abnormal feather and you'd like to see it in more detail, you can get handheld microscopes. And I have got this one here, I got it from Amazon. If you'd like to get something similar, I will leave a link as a pinned comment and in the description as well, so you can go and check it out. So this isn't sponsored or anything, I just thought it would be fun to mention this, but what I like about this one is it comes with a smartphone kind of grip thing. So what you do is you attach it to your phone and you position it with your phone's camera, and then you can use it as a microscope. It's got a little torch on there like that and then you can use this to have a look at your bird's feathers by opening up your camera app. You can take videos like I'm going to show you shortly, you can take pictures and things, and you can have a really good look at what your bird's feathers look like. I think this has about 120 magnification and that does the job. So let's talk about the two feathers that I've got from my birds, and these are quite old, so when you see the magnification clips you might see little white dots on there. That is just dust because these are old feathers, because we haven't had any feathers like this anytime recently. So we've got a feather from Pickles and a feather from Louie. I'm going to show you some close-up pictures and, as I said, the microscope pictures as well. So this is Pickles' tail feather, and as you can see at the top there, it is pinched in a little bit with a bit of discoloration with a few very light stress bars, but the rest of the feather is totally normal. Now this suggests to me, because we don't know exactly what happened here, that there was just a bit of trauma to this feather as it was growing in, and then after that initial moment of there being an issue, everything was fine. So that doesn't indicate to me that there's actually a proper issue. Normally with more severe issues you'll see stress bars all down the feathers, but this to me suggests that perhaps There was some rough play and a bit of messing about with her and Scampi. I don't even know if this was when we had Scampi. It might have been when she was on her own, to be honest. It's such an old feather. But yeah, this is just an example of what a stress bar might look like, because a lot of the ones you see online are just big black bars, but actually they can look very different depending on the feather. This feather looks significantly worse. This is Louie's feather, and you might be thinking, my goodness, what is going on there? Is she okay? And the answer is yes. We know exactly how this stress bar weird feather situation happens. You can see there's some pinching at the top there. There's a few stress bars all the way down. So this happened when Louie and Kipling first joined us. Kipling was very rambunctious, as he is anyway, and I think I could have positioned the food and water ever so slightly differently for them, especially with Louie with her one leg. And he was just climbing all over her all the time. He was a bit stressed. That's just the way that things were, because, you know, he was a rehome. He was just climbing all over her all the time, and unfortunately this was a moment when she had some tail feathers growing in, and that resulted in this. You can see just how many times he's been rambunctious and crawling all over her and being cheeky and scrabbling and things, and that resulted in a feather like this. Now this looks like an extreme feather, and you'd think, wow, that's a really serious issue. However, we know exactly how this happened, and it was from the feather trauma. But what's interesting is when you look at this under the microscope, you can see that there's actually, you know, the discoloration with the white stress bars. You can see the difference between the white and the red. When you look at it under the microscope, you can see some of the kind of feather not looking as it should in terms of the breakage. But, you know, as we've seen, as she's grown up, all of the feathers have been completely normal otherwise, so we're very pleased about that. But this is a very good example of a stress bar where there has been some trauma to it. The stress bars kind of a few lines down, all the way down the feather. However, the new ones that grew in were perfectly fine. Stress bars aren't the only things that you can see in your bird's feathers that may be abnormal. Maybe I'll make other videos like this if you'd like to see other feather abnormalities, although I don't have any in my flock, so I'd have to kind of collate some images. But it's very interesting to see how the health of your bird's feathers affects what is actually going on with your bird as well. Now, as I mentioned, you can rectify any of those issues that may have occurred when the feathers were growing in and had these stress bars, but actually those stress bars won't disappear until your bird molts again, and that could be a year, maybe a year and a half after the initial stress bar appears. So don't be disheartened if you sort everything out. Maybe it's a nutritional deficiency, you sort that out, you get great blood work, but the feather stress bar is still there. That's going to happen because the bird needs to molt out all those old feathers. Similarly, as I said, don't just assume that because your bird's feathers look fine that your bird is always going to be fine. They can't just change how the feathers look once they've grown in. I hope you found seeing the feathers under the microscope kind of interesting. I thought it was quite cool as well to have a little peek at those feathers. If you'd like to get your own, as I said, there'll be a link below if you want to go and have a look. It will be an affiliate link because that supports looking after my flock and my ability to make these videos for you, but this isn't a sponsored video or anything like that. I just thought it'd be fun to talk about feather health. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.